Good morning. It is 9:58 a.m. on a Friday, January 9th. Welcome to the podcast. So we have made it through the week. Yay, first week. And now it is time for Friday. So, like I was telling you, I'm doing the podcast Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 10 a.m. So let's dig right in. Okay, so a lot has happened, and like I've been telling you all week, I want to do segments on uh, if I were governor of Illinois, and then I want to go into um, I want to go into local Metro East politics. There's so much to talk about that I know that people aren't hearing about when they watch the local news, especially in the Metro East. And then lastly, my last thoughts for the topic that I was talking about this week of US federal government policy. Okay, so I want to start with if I were running for governor, what I would do. Now, I want to give a little bit of background here too. So, I'm a moderate Republican, and like I told you on Monday, the focus areas of the Republican Party in the state are just uh, not going to get us elected to a statewide office. It will get us elected regionally for like the House of Representatives for the legislature. Now, as I told you on Monday, what someone needs to do is that's actually running is first of all, they need to listen to his podcast and really listen to what voters are saying are the issues in the state. As Illinoisans, we are being taxed into oblivion, and there's all kinds of taxes. So, like I said on Monday, I would love to get rid of that income tax. And if you look at some of the other states, the states that are successful are states that do not have an income tax, which is probably about 6 or 7 states, the big ones being Texas and Florida. Now, where would we get the money from? But let me tell you what we've been doing so far. So there's a motor fuel tax, and since Prisco doubled, it's doubled. Now, one of the things that you're going to hear from the Democrat state level is, well, we need the money because federal government isn't giving us money. Now, they can say that as of February or March of this year, the money did stop. But what about previous years? Why are we getting money from the federal government, yet the taxpayers, Illinoisans, are still getting taxed on everything that's not held down in the state? Okay, vehicle fees. Now, it would look like that those would be the same. So, one is the state gas tax. That's definitely coming from the legislature and the governor, who are dominant Democrats. Uh, Vehicle fees, like I said, and I've noticed that too. And what is their criteria to raise the fees for vehicles? Okay, now the fair ones are tobacco and nicotine. Fair meaning that a lot of other states are doing that too. They kind of sort of call those sin taxes. Okay, so that's a way to generate revenue. And also, maybe to get people who normally don't contribute in the income tax to pay as well. So some of these are specifically targeting people who don't normally pay taxes, and I get that. That's a backdoor way to do things. And I'm more for telling people, well, hey, we need to generate revenue, and everyone in the state needs to be helping out. But I'll get more into that later. All right. So sports betting, guess what? You're getting taxed. And the casinos are getting taxed too. What needs to happen though, we need to look at how much money we're getting, and also a new word that doesn't that's not said a lot, called audits. Why aren't we specifically seeing where the money's coming from? Right? Because we are generating other revenue besides taxpayer dollars from the income tax. Okay. Now, also, they put one in there that I thought was interesting. Short-term rentals require platforms like Airbnb and VRBO to pay the state's hotel operators tax. Okay, well, the governor, as far as I know, owns a hotel chain. Okay, why isn't he making hotels pay more of a state tax as well if he's going to go after the Airbnbs? Prior to this tax, it was reasonable for people to come to the state and stay in an Airbnb versus hotels. And now that's been taken away. Well, it's going to affect tourism coming into the state, especially to like Chicago, if we are penalizing them for trying to save money. Okay. And then, of course, you got your business taxes, and you're probably not aware, but businesses in the state get taxed hugely. There was recently a initiative from the mayor of Chicago that if you had over 500 employees, that they were going to tax you on those people. That is a great way to get people to leave your state and not come back. And in general, there is a transition or pivot. Pivot is a better word to say, hey, when people come to the state, we are financially responsible for them no matter what their status is. And we're talking about people based on us being a sanctuary state, right? So the state, the governor, the legislature, who is dominated by Democrats, they're like, yes, taxpayer. Illinoisans are great taxpayers. You're going to not only have an income tax, but we're going to put even more on your backs. And I would say, get these taxes, different taxes, off of our backs. Okay, so let's look at the other stuff. There's franchise tax and the property taxes. Like I said earlier, Illinois has the second or third highest property taxes in the United States of America. And last time we voted, the moderate Republican that was the nominee didn't even mention that. Why are the people in our party only interested in abortion and calling women out and all that stuff? We cannot win a state election like that in this state. And like I told you, that is settled law, and you're not going to convince most women that the government, the state government, needs to be involved in that in the first place. Okay, so back to these taxes. Now, they're saying that these taxes or additional taxes, which they're going to raise this year, because in February, March, when the federal government started withholding funds, the governor especially is like, oh, okay, well, let's look at it. Now, we've seen the indication of it already in Chicago with those property taxes, which doubled and people didn't like. Now, here's what they're saying, why they want to do it. Well, aim to fund state operations, including new programs for non-citizens. Now, these aren't my words, these are their words, and have added billions in revenue, although some tax relief measures like temporary grocery tax pauses. And the only reason I mention that is because, who's running for governor this year? Governor Pritzker is. So he took off that sales tax on groceries until after the election. And what do you think he's going to do? He's going to double it. Why? Because they don't have the revenue. And it's the blame game of saying, well, we need to take care of people that aren't even Illinoisans, meaning citizens in Illinois, to make up for what we're not getting. And that type of philosophy with taxes is just growing in this state since Governor Pritzker got elected. And they don't even report most of the stuff financially. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast. So, Illinois, if I were running for governor. Now, let me point your attention to something that they were trying to do. The governor, last time he ran, he proposed a graduated income tax. And luckily, the voters got to vote on it because it would have been the biggest disaster that we've ever seen. So single filers, it would have been, if you make under 10,000, 4.75, then it would have been 10,000 to 100,000, 4.9, and you can see a pattern emerging. So if you make over $750,000, you would have been paying 7.99% of your net income. Now, why am I bringing this up? First of all, the governor, I would tell you, didn't want this to pass. He makes over $750,000. So you give it to the voters when you know that they're not going to go for it, because the legislature could have passed it. Now, currently, there's a flat tax. And so everybody pays the same percentage no matter how much money you make. That is in the state constitution. So they were trying to amend the state constitution so that they could start charging people who are working, basically, because if you look at what they were doing, excuse me, 0 to 10,000 was 4.7. Okay. Then it goes to 10 to 100,000, 4.9. That's pretty high. And nobody should be paying more, in my view, based on making more money. That doesn't make sense to me. Should be one rate for all. And currently in Illinois, unless you get rid of the constitutional amendment saying that, hey, no matter what you're making, that's their percentage. And I would tell you, actually, if we can start bringing in money from other areas like tourism, I mean, we've got lakes that people would like to fish in. Chicago, there's stuff to see there. Probably some other cities, if we invest in the cities to bring people there, that we would have money. So, and then, of course, what's driving them out of Chicago and why they got up in arms when the mayor of Chicago wanted to, after 500 people, you're paying for everybody else. I mean, who else, who would agree to that? That's like the mayor saying, hey, guys, if I have over 10 people working for me, why don't I put an additional 5% tax on their income to help pay for anybody else that comes and works for us? You think that the mayor's office would have agreed to do that? Yet for taxpayers, it seems like that they're like, oh well, we don't care. Let's give it to them. Okay, so corporate taxes are high. I would take those down some because you want to incentivize, and the rest of the country is doing that where states are more successful. You want to bring in businesses. Why? Businesses bring in income to your state. If you tax them too much, and you can check me out on this, you are telling them, hey, we're going to take the money away from you in Illinois and we're going to give it to non-citizens in this state. And that's coming from the governor, and that's coming from the legislature. And so, quite honestly, when are Illinoisan voters going to get tired of that? Okay, so under a moderate Republican in Illinois, if they start talking about these issues, especially with those property taxes, when I'm out and around people, I'm not. You can't make this up. Every year, the property taxes go up for no reason because they won't tell you why. The real reason is to cover these other social programs with immigrants in the state. Now, I'm going to pivot to something that you probably weren't aware of, right? So I'm going out of sequence here, but I'm going to pivot to the state laws that are affecting the Metro East, meaning people like me, and we have high numbers of voters in this part of Illinois. Did you know that there's something called the Court Access, Safety, and Participation Act? It's called the SALT Act. Bars immigration arrests at courthouses. That's what the law says. The legislature passed that. And until I looked this up, I had no idea. Now, like I told you, I watch WGN News. Their focus seems to be on anything that the federal current administration is doing. And the local stuff, and there's some good podcasts out there. Don't think that there's not. But for the Metro East, boy, it's kind of silent unless you reach out to Chicago. See, the state of Illinois is comprised of many people. Now, Cook County might have the bulk of the people, maybe. I would have to check the numbers of people. But what about the rest of the state? We matter too. And on this immigration policy, why was this passed? Are the people representing us? And I would tell you probably people who represent us in this part of the state said no, that they didn't want it. But remember, I said that the Democrats have a super majority. They could pass anything, right? Okay. So the other one is new guidelines for schools regarding immigrant rights. Now, think about that. Immigrants' rights. They don't differentiate if they're here legally or not. If they are here legally, then the law pertains to them and they would get benefits. Here's what your governor, Pritzker, and the legislature did. Mandate that public schools provide equal tuition for K through 12 education to all children, regardless of immigration status, prohibiting schools from asking about or sharing citizenship status, and ensuring access to services like meals, transport, and support for English learners. Your legislature and your governor passed that. Are we saying that we're okay with this? Everybody should be treated fairly. Everyone. But if you're not in the country legally, the law states that you have to go back. Why is this such a hateful debate for people? Why is it that Illinoisans are responsible for the welfare of people who have to flee their own countries? And up until January 20th, the federal government was giving the state money, and we're not even sure if it went to them or whatever, but those are taxpayer dollars from federal taxes. And now Illinois is going to say, hey, all of these children, we don't care that their immigration status might say that they're not really Illinoisans or here legally. Taxpayers, you're going to pay for it. Well, what about the other Illinoisans in this state who actually need the help? So I say, if I were running for governor, we take care of our Illinoisan citizens and also people who are here legally. The law supports that, but it doesn't support anybody or everybody just because we're sanctuary city. Speaking of the sanctuary city, I think it's time to get rid of that. If I were running for governor of Illinois, that has been a disaster and will be on a case by case basis. Moderate Republicans are good people. There are moderate Democrats. What we need to do is make it fair to our citizens, because as a result of that policy alone, we're in greater debt than we should be. And like I previously said, Illinois needs to take care of Illinoisans, and it has to be fair. Now, I've hit those two areas. Those are related. And if you look at the facts and data, property taxes are going to go up if you leave in this legislature and governor in office, because after they win and after he gets that third term, we don't know what he's going to do about taxes and about immigration. And some people could say, well, we should be able to. Yes, if they're here legally. Illinois is in debt. They're in debt probably $400 billion. Now, I checked something out here. Every state is in debt. That's not the issue, because of situational things that can happen within the state. We are in great debt. Why? Because the governor has mismanaged with the legislature the budget. And if you don't believe me how much power they have, go and check how much you're going to be paying in power this year. Why are the rates expensive? Well, the rates are expensive because the legislature and then the governor signs it, say that the rates go up because of infrastructure. And they just started talking about data centers. So they're trying to blame it on that, saying, "Well, we got to do the infrastructure and all that stuff." Money issues in this state are critical. And if I were running for governor, or I would tell you, have the candidates listen to my podcast. We can win in this state just on those two issues. We can win on, well, actually three: crime, immigration, and taxes. All right. So more on that on Monday. If I were running to be the governor of Illinois, now I want to talk about what I was talking about recently this week on the podcast. And I think that it is very important to get facts and details from the mainstream media. Since I've done the podcast, we've kind of spiraled again into more accusations against the administration, and there's there's no facts being said, and people are really starting to get angry, and it's because of the sound bites. And what we really need to do is dig in more with facts and details. And I get it. People get emotional, but there, in my opinion, and this is the opinion part of it, you can't call everything bad just because you don't like the person. And maybe as humans, that's just our way. But we need to guard against that, because with extreme emotion, nothing will get done. And the United States of America has three branches of government, as you are aware of. Maybe next time, before we make a harsh judgment, give the process a chance to work. Because if you do that, then things change at that point, and you really will get some better traction out of it. Military actions are important for the United States. I was just looking for a note, sorry. And no matter how you feel, my podcast is about getting some facts out there and maybe giving it a shot of seeing the other side with respect. Military actions that are done by any president hasn't changed in the last 80 years, honestly. And it's their opinion. That's why we have elections. And we are looking at if the mainstream media gives off all the facts and details, if Congress has their hand in it, if you don't like someone, and my perception is they don't like this president at all, they would argue with him over if the sky is blue or not. And when you reach that point, there's no facts, just extreme emotions. Look at how our military would be in danger if more of the facts were known. And by virtue of that, why would you tell anyone in Congress what you're doing? And remember that the president has a huge staff of attorneys. And the president is not going to do anything that he can't defend against the judicial branch. Maybe we need to have a little bit more trust in that. And also, Congress is going to call him out too. But let's get to the judicial part of the military actions before you have commentators on these news agencies saying, well, I'm not sure if it's legal. Well, what do you know? It's your opinion. That is the judicial branch of government's job to figure out. And press wise, to kind of end this, what impression does it give the rest of the world when we are constantly infighting about policies that the Trump administration is doing? I have never, ever heard the mainstream media, excluding one, give the guy any praise or the benefit of the doubt. Why are we not doing that? We should be talking about it, but we shouldn't be ultimately judging it harshly like we're doing. Okay, so I will be back on Monday at 10 a.m. This was our first week. Please share this with other people. And local politics in Illinois do matter. Have a great weekend, everyone.